Hey, it's Andrew here at BTO Range. Oh, one of my nuts is out here on the table. We're here in Conroe, Texas, and today on the bench we have another little Ruger. I mean, we can go months and months without getting old model Rugers in, and then here in the space of a few weeks, we've gotten a couple, or three, I think. Two of them actually are boxed. This is a little bit different model, the smaller one. It's a Ruger Super Bearcat from 1973. So, like we did on the single six video, let's start from the beginning. We have the red and black box, which is correct again for the Bearcat and Super Bearcat revolvers from that time period. And uh, we'll just open her up here. We'll talk about this stuff here in just a second. Bring the revolver out, and to clear the revolver, same type of deal. We go to half cock like any traditional single action revolver and clear the chambers. So the Bearcat was introduced in 1958 by Ruger. Ruger had the single six in line, and they wanted a smaller kit gun kind of revolver for people to use on the trail, not as big, not as heavy as the single six. So they developed this Bearcat, and it's kind of reminiscent of the older Remington single action revolvers uh, from the 19th century as far as the grip frame goes. So it's the frame and the grip frame are integral, they're not separate. And the original Bearcat, the frame was alloy aluminum. So the gun weighed, just a skosh over 16 ounces, or right at 1 pound. So it was a really trim, little light, six shot, 22 long rifle revolver, fixed sights. Um, and the trigger guard on that unit was alloy aluminum also, but it was actually anodized in a brass color. So a lot of people think it's a brass trigger guard on those early Bearcats, but they're not. It's aluminum that is actually anodized to look like brass. So that would be the first model Bearcat, which started in 1958 and ran up through 1970. So in 1970, they discontinued the Bearcat. They reintroduced it in 71 with a steel frame and steel trigger guard. Now, some of the first ones, they call it the Super Bearcat. It was now called the Super Bearcat. And the first production of those still used trigger guards from the earlier production. They didn't just throw all those trigger guards away. So you'll see steel frame Super Bearcats with the what looks like brass trigger guard, and that would just be probably a 1971 through probably half of 72 in the Super Bearcat production. So those guns lasted only until 1974. So the Super Bearcat run was only from 71 through 74. This particular gun is 1973. So when now before we finish talking about production dates, after 74 they went away. That's when the whole transfer bar thing started happening, and there was a interview with Bill Ruger, a long time ago, probably 40 years ago or more now. But he had stated that when they designed the Bearcat, or the Super Bearcat, that was the first single action revolver that they designed with the idea that they were going to put a transfer bar in it. And it just didn't happen for whatever reason. So um, those didn't. But in 1993, they reintroduced a new model Bearcat revolver that did have the transfer bar. It was available in stainless steel, and there were some distributor exclusives with different barrel lengths and a bird's head grip configuration. There's some different uh, sub variations in that newer gun that started in 1993. And we're not going to talk when we get one of those newer guns in. We may do a separate video on it, but there is a recall on those now. A lot of folks will talk about a recall on the Ruger Bearcat. That is specifically the new model Bearcat. Um, Serial numbers 93-00500 through 01944 would be those serial numbers. And the problem is with that recall is the 22 Magnum cylinder could possibly be mistimed in the revolver, causing a pressure spike because the projectile doesn't enter into the barrel throat like it should. So, if that's the case, there is still an active recall on those, but only within that particular serial number range. These older model guns not affected. There were no Magnum cylinders for the older model guns. And as far as I know, Ruger won't fit a Magnum cylinder to these older model guns. So that said, let's take a look at this one and just discuss what we're looking at. So we have the wax paper in here, but we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have the instruction sheet with it. So, and if we look at the markings on the end of the box, we see it's marked as Bearcat. And you'll see later boxes that have the same wording here, but there's a white banner that says has the word super in it. So Ruger did use Bearcat boxes until Bearcat boxes were exhausted to ship the Super Bearcats. They didn't just throw away the boxes. So it's not terribly unusual to find a Super Bearcat revolver with a older Bearcat box and instruction sheet that doesn't reference Super Bearcat. So that's not terribly unusual. So let's take a look at this little guy. So when we're evaluating these little Super Bearcats or Bearcats for that model, same thing we're always going to look at. We talk about scarcity, originality, and condition, right? So if you the older model Bearcats were made from 58, and if you include uh, the Super Bearcat production from 58 until 74, right? So what, 16 years? So there was a little bit of production on these guns. The Super Bearcat is rarer because it was only made for 3 years. So that said, if you were collecting old model Ruger single actions, you would need really all three variants. You would need the uh, the older gun with the brass color trigger guard. You would need the Super Bearcat, and you would also need the very early model, which was from 1958 through 1960, which a lot of collectors call an Alpha Cat. And the reason they call it an Alpha Cat is because of the serial number configuration. Those earlier guns, the first series ran from 0 through 999, and then they started over at A001 through A999, and they marched on through the alphabet. And then by 1960, they went to a all numeric system, and then when the Super Bearcat was launched in 71, it actually had a prefix, and this is a 91 dash prefix, which is correct for the that year Super Bearcat. And then the 93 issue or 93 prefix with the new model Super Bearcat. So to remove the cylinder from this little guy, it's just like we did on the single six or really any other single action revolver. On this gun, regardless of if it's a new model or an old model, so regardless if it has a transfer bar or not, we're still going to find the half cock notch with the hammer. We're going to open the cylinder, push in the base pin latch, remove the base pin, and then the cylinder will just lift out of the window. So just like we saw with the single six, it's a long rifle cylinder. We have a channel all the way around with an elevated rim on the side. Now, what's unique to the Bearcat, and we'll get a still photo of it here in a little bit, is the engraving on the cylinder. The cylinders are unfluted, and it has a bear on one side and a cat on the other. So hence, I guess, Bearcat. Um, so that's kind of unique to this Ruger model. Now, one thing about this gun is that at some point it went back to Ruger and was converted to a transfer bar system. So what I mean by that is, now let's get it back together. So I'm not sure why it went back to Ruger. It may well have went back to Ruger specifically just for that conversion. A lot of people did that. And then there's, ooh, that's not good. There we go. So a lot of people send it back just to be able to load that six cylinder. And to be clear on what we're talking about, on a old model single action, one without the transfer bar. There we go. One without the transfer bar, you can really only safely carry it with five cartridges in the cylinder with a hammer down on an empty. Because if you drop the gun, uh, there's nothing to prevent it. If it lands on the hammer spur, there's nothing to prevent it from discharging the cartridge. So that's been the thing with Colt pattern single action, old model Ruger single actions, all of the Italian reproductions, or most of the Italian reproductions of the Colt pattern single action, that they should only be carried with five. Um, so Ruger didn't invent the transfer bar design. Ivor Johnson did years and years and years ago, but Ruger incorporated it into their single action guns to make it safe to carry with all six chambers loaded. So this particular gun, and we'll get a still picture of that too. Right there is the transfer bar. So that's been converted. And normally that's a big deal for Ruger collectors on these old model guns, is they would prefer it to not have been converted. But when you sent the gun in, and again, if you sent the gun in for any reason, whether it was some kind of unrelated repair or refinishing or whatever, Ruger is going to convert it, but they're going to send your old parts back. So this is the original, excuse me, these are the original old model parts that came out of this gun. So ostensibly, you could convert this back to its original configuration. So the world is not lost because the gun's been converted to new model, as long as you know you still have the parts with it. So this gun does have the parts with it. So you could really make the argument that it's a more usable gun if you plan to use the gun to shoot on the trail or whatever, because you can load all six safely without worrying about the whole drop issue. Um, but then again, there's a lot of people that load five and are just happy with that too, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can make the argument either way. The collectors are going to want it unmolested in the old model configuration, but you can certainly do that if you have the parts. What one of these guns bring? Well, again, there are a few niche variations. The Alpha Cats, the ones with the older guns with the Alpha serial numbers, tend to bring a little bit more money. And condition is everything. Excuse me. This gun is in excellent condition. Again, like we saw on the single six, we don't have any tarnishing or oxidation on the sides of the hammer, which are polished bright. These old walnut grips are in excellent shape. The original guns, the first gun, the Alpha, the in the early Alpha Cat series, will have oiled rosewood and not walnut. So those tend to bring a little bit of a premium. So especially the ones that bring the most money are the ones that are 1958 production, no alpha prefix, three-digit serial numbers. I mean, those are the earliest ones. They bring the most money. A gun in this condition with the box, we have the parts. It's probably going to be in that $400 to $500 range, typically on the collector market. Um, and then again, you know, you're going to want, for a Ruger collector to have a complete collection of Bearcats, you have the different variants to get, right? And you can include the new model. And I didn't look at dealer pricing on the new model guns, and then there are distributor exclusives, so you can make a whole little collection of Bearcats. But it's noticeably smaller than the single six. Grips don't interchange. Most of the parts don't interchange, and so it's its own unique animal. But uh, you can find them. They're out there. They make a great little gun, especially for persons with smaller hands. And if you have a larger hand, that can be a little bit difficult to get a comfortable grip on and shoot. But fortunately, it's a 22 long rifle, so you don't have, you know, the recoil aspect is not there. But uh, I like them. They're super neat little guns, and we were glad to be able to get this one. So the Ruger Bearcat, this is a 1970 or Super Bearcat. This gun is a 1973 gun. They're worth seeking out. I watch for these red and black boxes. Anytime I see somebody dragging one of these red and black boxes in, I really like it because it's an older Ruger. Now, of course, there are yellow and white boxes, white boxes. The old Super Blackhawks have brown cases. I mean, there's all kind of stuff with Ruger to look for on the early models. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think about these older Bearcats. If you've ever had a Bearcat, um, have some experience with this when you were younger. Now, in my opinion, if I was alive when a gun was made, it is not an old gun. So this is not an old gun. I'm just saying it from 1973. It's certainly not an old gun. So, but it is a classic. It is discontinued, so it's worth you talking about. Uh, hey, we appreciate you watching these videos. We enjoy the interaction with you folks, and we will see you on the next one.